Hello and welcome to the Blueprint Review Podcast, our monthly chat about a wide range of films, new or old, popular or obscure, focusing largely but not exclusively on physical media, much like the site itself. So on the show, we talk about discs we're looking forward to and also review kind of random titles that we watched from our collections or elsewhere. But after enjoying the chat I had with Justin last month about horror films, I thought I'd come up with another theme for this episode. And with it being November, I figured the best fit would be film noir, because a lot of people they have that noir-vember kind of thing going on and watch as much film noir as they can. So I thought, why not? I love the genre myself, so I thought let's focus on that this month. But first of all, let's just introduce ourselves. So I'm David Brooke. As any other listeners would recognize, I'm Blueprint Review's editor. And with me here today, I've got longtime writer Andy Goulding, who listeners should also be familiar with from the first few episodes.
Hello.
Hello. And we also have a newcomer to the podcast, but one of our regular writers over at Blueprint Review, and that's John Meakin. So, John, can you just tell us a little bit about your background with the site and with the kind of films in general?
Yeah, no worries. And hello, everyone. So, yeah, I was born in 75, so grew up in the 80s with a mix of bank holiday, westerns, Bond, Jaws, steadily pickled in Star Wars for a few years. Then got into the 90s, and it always throws people because I am so obsessed with film now. When I tell people that my favorite film is probably still Dances with Wolves, but it's because I saw that film split over 2 nights when I was about 17 on ITV. And it blew me away. And I thought, why am I watching a 4-hour Western, most of it subtitled? There's got to be something in this. And from that, it just spiraled. So then through the 90s, really started getting into reading about film, seeing more interesting ones. Mid 2000s, I started writing for a few internet sites. Anyone might remember the heady days of Usenet boards that predated forums as we know them, and I contributed to the Virgin host boards where they had various subjects, and I hosted the film one. And then in later years, work, kids, marriage, all of that got in the way. More recently, I've been writing reviews again for Blueprint. Thank you to David for giving me the opportunity to waffle enthusiastically occasionally. So yeah, that's about where I'm at the moment.
Nice, excellent. I must admit, you've been involved with the website for a while, but I've never had a chance to kind of sit and chat. So it's nice to get a bit of background and know a bit more about you. So fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really interesting as well to hear someone say about the Dances with Wolves is their favourite film, because it's one of those films that's so often now you just hear it referred to as people complain that it beat Goodfellas to the Best Picture Oscar, and I always love to hear the other side of it rather than like the same stuff that you hear all the time. So it's fascinating to meet someone who that's their favourite film. My mum loves that film as well.
I love Goodfellas. I do love Goodfellas. But we have not got time to get into why I think it was the right choice that year.
I've not seen it for a long time, but it's I was a big fan back then, but I've not seen it since the VHS days. It's definitely one I should check out on a bigger screen, higher quality kind of copy, definitely. I think I was too young to see the cinema when it came out.
Has anyone seen it? Hasn't Kevin Costner got some sort of epic Western
this Horizon
year? Yeah.
I didn't get around to it.
I haven't seen it yet. And you know what? Because of Dances with Wolves, because of Untouchables, because of a couple of others, I'll always give that man a break.
Yeah.
And I really, really thought when I was reading what he was trying to do with Horizon, I thought he's trying to break the cinema distribution model. He's trying to do something really special here.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I've not seen it yet, but everything I've seen that's happened in the fallout, I think he just completely misread the room. And it's so sad because what he's attempting to do is foolhardy at best.
Yeah,
because it could be an amazing film. And I'm already against the critics who are saying it should have been a TV show.
Yeah.
Because no, it shouldn't have been a TV show. It was done as a film, but 3-4 hour films, good grief, man. What are you playing at? You know?
But what's interesting with that, I found that the critics were pretty kind of lukewarm on it, but the more kind of just like friends and kind of bloggers and things that I've seen it. I've a lot of people have been just really standing up for it, and I'm very keen to watch it, to be honest. But it just kind of came and went in our local cinema. It was on for a week or two, but it was on kind of dodgy times that I couldn't get to because of different commitments. But it's definitely one I want to try and catch. I'm hoping they'll bring the first one back when the next one comes. If the next one does come to the cinema, that's the worry, that they're all just going to get shoved on Paramount Plus or something. Yeah. Cool. Anyway, I said I was going to keep it to an hour, and we're already going off target. But never mind. Always on this show, but I don't mind. What I was quickly going to talk about next is that our usual kind of opening segment, and that's just talking about any physical releases that we're excited about. I must admit, I sent the schedule to the kind of schedule to you guys, saying, "Oh, we're going to chat about this," and I totally forgot to pick anything. But I had a little quick look at my list, and there are a couple of titles that I had to mention, and that is the BFI have announced an amazing lineup for the kind of the first quarter of next year. And I just have to mention some of those. I mean, the big one of the big ones had already been kind of teased earlier, so I already knew about it. But that was the Chantal Akerman box set.
Oh yeah,
the first part of that, which is just loaded with films that I need to see, because I must admit I've not seen any of her films yet. But after her I'm trying to think of the name now, Jean Dielman. After that was voted like the best film of all time in the Saturday Times poll, I thought, well, I should watch it, and. Even though it sounds very challenging. But this box set's going to it sounds like a good chance to kind of get to grips with her work. I'm not sure if I'm going to review it. I was planning on it, but there's loads coming out that month, so I just don't know if I'm going to fit it in. But yeah, so that was I was very excited about. But also, possibly more exciting was the announcement that they were going to have more Akira Kurosawa on Blu-ray.
Yes.
So they announced High and Low and Stray Dog. And also Yojimbo and Sanjuro, all within the first few months of the year. So that was very exciting.
Guess what my pick was for this section as well? Straight into the Kurosawa BFIs.
Yeah, you know? I've got it on my list as well. Surprise, surprise.
There we go. There we go. We're on the same page.
Excellent. Are there any others that you guys want to talk about, or are we just on the same wavelength on this one?
Well, there was another one that I know you swooped in and got like the swine you are, David. Mikey and Nikki.
Yes,
the Elaine May film, which I absolutely love. That's coming out on Criterion.
I have the screener in front of me.
Have you managed to watch it yet?
Not yet. No.
I look forward to that review. And just tying in with what we're doing here today as well, there's a noir that I haven't seen called Black Tuesday, which Eureka are releasing a Masters of Cinema of, which I'm very keen to see.
Yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. I mentioned this later in the show actually, but I enjoyed it a great deal. My review is up on the site somewhere. It's a very noir film noir. It's very dark. It's pretty brutal, but I enjoyed it a lot. It's really, really good.
Cool.
And John, are there any others that we've not mentioned that are on your list?
Yeah, Andy, I can't believe it. You've picked Black Tuesday as well, and that was definitely on my wavelength. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to the BFI's releases next year, because I don't think they get enough love in the boutique world. No. Whenever you see on forums, everyone's talking about Criterion and Arrow, Eureka, etc. I love how the BFI seem to go to such length to find the most eccentric extras they can put on.
Yeah.
That goes from their own archive. It's just fascinating stuff they sometimes find. And the Kurosawas, and especially his, I want to say his lesser known work, but of course to most people like us are waiting for things like Stray Dog, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what they're doing with those.
Yeah, Kronos is another big one. I'm not a huge fan of Kronos. I like it, but I think a lot of other people are quite excited about that was also announced. But yeah,
Yes.
but it had to be the Kurosawa ones are the big ones for me, though. Excellent. Well, yeah, lots to look forward to then. So let's, I guess next we can move straight into our theme. I think I want to start with kind of trying to define film noir, because it's a really difficult. Yeah, I think. I was going to kind of just ask your opinion on what you think makes a film noir, because it is quite a. It's a difficult one. I think when I was younger, I used to think, oh, it was just kind of films with people in trench coats and fedoras, detectives, kind of. But that's really only kind of like one strand of film noir. That's more just the kind of Philip Marlowe kind of stuff. But there's more to it. There are two things that jumped out for me, because I think because noir is one of these genres where, when I was a teenager, I watched a few and I loved them. But then I thought, oh, I love this genre, but I never really actually watched that many of them. I realized it was more recent. Well, I say more recently, maybe in the last like 10 years or so, I've really been properly digging into them. When there's been more that have been released and I've had a chance to review them, I've just been hoovering them up, and I've started to discover there's more to it than I imagined. But I think for me, I guess two of the kind of key elements. One is, I think they're always kind of fueled by a dark psychology. There's always kind of quite a murky kind of moral boundaries going on. There's those, and that's kind of one of the main reasons I enjoy them. Is that kind of murky morality and this kind of dark psychology. And I think as well, another kind of a key plot device that is not, I guess, possibly not in all of them, but in a huge amount of the film noirs, or what I would think is a film noir, is usually have an average Joe or someone fairly average kind of Joe who gets caught up in something against their usual moral code, or does something wrong, or takes one kind of bad decision that kind of unravels and spirals out of control. That's quite a common trope I find from noir, but again, maybe not all of them. But I find that makes some of the noirs that kind of draw me in that I really enjoy. But how about you guys, Andrew? Andy, what sort of what do you think makes a good noir, or what do you think noir is?
Yeah, it's a real tough one. I was like you, my definition of it initially was a lot more kind of narrow. I when I first started watching it, I always thought, oh, there has to be a detective, there has to be a crime, it has to be in a big city. And then the more you dig into the genre, you see there's so many different types of it, and no two people out there agree completely on it. You get these really sort of prescriptive people who go, oh, that's not noir, you can't say that, you can't have that on the list for noir. And it's become one of these things that is just it's like when you talk to people about Britpop and people go, oh, you have to be between 93 and 97 and they have to be in this, and it's just, I think there's a lot to be said for letting people have that pooling these ideas of what everyone thinks is noir. I'm not saying you can't have that and you can't have that. So I was going to ask for some help from you guys in sort of defining what isn't noir, because for some, that's what I find really interesting.
That's going to be tough.
Yeah,
because Andy's touched on it right there. The thing that's always fascinated me about film noir, it's not a true genre, because it's the only one that was identified after the fact.
Yeah.
So you go through the late 30s into the 40s, and especially post-war, when everyone was getting quite depressed, they were just thrillers. And it was kind of, then the British and the French press were the ones who looked at what Hollywood were producing in the studio system and said, look at all these themes that are joining together. And I can't remember now who coined film noir, but I'm sure it was in the French press, of course. And the way it works is, one of the things that always fascinated me about filmmaking is especially in Hollywood, is the push and the pull between art and commerce. And it's like you've got all of the German expressionism that was starting to influence writers and directors in Hollywood who were struggling with the producers within the studio system and doing what they could to get their identity onto film. And it seems to be one of the few times that the two have really gelled. So where a producer was going, I want a hard story, I want something tough, and the guys are like, yeah, I'm going to pull out the Dutch angles, I'm going to do the crazy compositions, I'm going to do the shadows, etc., etc. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And then in later years, you've got a kind of, I hate the term postmodern, but I think it fits in this. And it's where everyone understood what noir basically should look like, and people started playing with the concept. And even when they've tried to stretch the idea of it, the films that come out are still great.
Yeah. You mentioned the war. I think there was definitely a big. There was a kind of a new kind of wave of noir after World War II, because people were coming back after the horrors that they'd experienced, and it was reflected in these films. The films became quite dark. They became about tortured souls and things like this, and it kind of, because you mentioned originally how they obviously weren't called that back then. I think I've heard as well that they weren't even just called thrillers. I think a lot of them were actually called melodramas, because a lot of noir is about these dramas that are quite that play well, really kind of horrible things are happening, big things are happening. So it is kind of overbaked drama in a way. Which is weird. Like these days, they would, if you mentioned melodrama, you'd think it was the complete opposite of noir, but actually, really, it grew out of that in a way.
Yeah. Last month, Criterion released Double Indemnity and Mildred Pierce, and both were based on books by James Cain, and I had the opportunity to review them on the site. So I'm possibly going over old ground, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But watching the two films together fascinated me, because Double Indemnity still feels fresh. It feels so alive. And a year later, they adapted Mildred Pierce, and I thought it was awful. And it's listed as a classic.
Review, actually, I saw your review, John, because I love Mildred Pierce. But
oh, do you really? I'm so sorry. I apologise profusely. But you know, watching it after Double Indemnity, and seeing that it was like it's like someone had rewound 10 years. And when you read what actually happened with the story, there was no murder in the original book. They literally took a melodrama, bolted a murder on, but the real noir aspect of the story was still there. And it's basically about the oppression of women. So it's a really strong story. And actually, take the murder out of it, it would have still been a valid story. So right there, you've got two stories coming from the same author originally that ended up very different, and both are ostensibly noir.
Well, John just mentioned there Double Indemnity, so that's probably a good time to jump in here and just say that was my jumping off point with noir, which I think is the same for a lot of people. It's the first one I saw, and I didn't really at the time. I didn't really. I didn't really have any idea about the genre of noir or anything, but I just loved it straight away, and it still remains like a high watermark that every one seems to be shooting for. Can you guys remember what your first foray into the genre was?
Yeah, well, mine was The Big Sleep by a long way. As I say, I saw that, and I didn't really see anything else. Classic noir. I did see some neo noir, which we might get into a little later. But yeah, The Big Sleep was the first one for me. And as I say, I didn't watch many for a while after that. I think I did watch Double Indemnity. Was well, no, actually, no. I tell you, no. Sorry, I tell a lie. I probably I did see The Third Man. I'd like to think. I think I saw The Big Sleep first, but The Third Man I definitely saw soon after. And The Third Man is up there with one of my favorite films of all time. So that's
fantastic.
It's probably my favorite. Well, it probably is my favorite.
Can I interject there? There? Because we talked about physical releases.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen? There's a 4K of The Third Man coming out, box set, and it's a music box.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
You can open it and get the theme. That's fantastic.
It's crazy.
Sorry, please carry on.
So yeah, those are the big two for me. Weirdly though, Big Sleep I've not seen for a long time, so it's one I'm desperate to revisit, and I keep almost watching it and then deciding I'll watch one I haven't seen, but actually it's been so long I feel like I haven't seen it. But
Yeah, it's
I have a strong memory. Yeah,
because I remember watching it and thinking I'd not really following the plot, and I'd read a lot of things that said the plot doesn't matter too much because it's
Yeah.
about the detective more, and that's what's interesting. But once everyone starts shooting each other and you don't know why, it does become a bit difficult to relax into.
From what I remember, I think a lot of what impressed me with it was just the kind of dialogue, the kind of interplay between the characters and kind of the style of it that I just fell in love with. But as I say, I think possibly because it's so contrived, it was probably why The Third Man was the one where after I watched that, I latched much more kind of deeply into that, and that just became an all-time favorite that I've revisited quite a lot.
Interesting that one of your first ones and quintessential ones for you is a British film as well.
Yeah. It's although actually I was going to mention this is actually what you could. I never ever thought of this as a film noir, but I have heard people suggest that it is Casablanca. I mean, would you guys call Casablanca a film noir? I wouldn't normally think of it as one, but I think some people do, and there are certainly some of the ingredients there. Would either of you class that as a film noir? Because that would be my first.
I haven't considered it a film noir before, but like I say, I'm not one who would prescribe to it can't be, because again, at the time they would not have been intending to make a film noir.
No.
If the themes and the if the story's there and it suits, then it is.
Yeah, it's certainly got elements, hasn't it? It's certainly the elements in there. It's possibly what would sort of eliminate it for me in just sort of what I think of as not many noirs have that bigger sort of romantic flourish at the end.
No, that's true. I think that would be definitely something that sets it aside. I think because actually when I was making little lists of some kind of films that have some favorites that I wanted to mention, and actually I ended up making a category called noirish, which is kind of films that have noir flavors but don't feel like what I personally would feel as a film noir. So films like The Sweet Smell of Success, which I think some people consider noir, but I don't know if it doesn't quite fit for me. Something like Champion, which is like a sports movie but also very noir like.
Can I just jump in there? I made a little list of boxing noirs, because that is a real like sort of subgenre of a subgenre, really. And I was amazed at how many I started getting. There's like the Setup, Body and Soul, Champion, The Killers has boxing elements in it. The Harder They Fall.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Later down the line, there's like neo noirs, Fat City, even Killer's Kiss is boxing related. It's something about, I guess it's the brutality of the sport sort of makes it an obvious go-to for the genre.
Cool. Well, should we talk about kind of favorites? And I'm going to run through. I've made a couple of lists. So I've got a list of just classic favorites that are kind of most people will have in lists. They're quite respected. But ones that personally I really like. I've mentioned already The Third Man, Big Sleep, Double Indemnity. Pick Up on South Street, that's one of my favorites.
Yes.
Crisscross, I liked that a lot. The Big Heat. Laura, I enjoyed a lot. The Big Combo. Oh, Touch of Evil is one of my all-time favorites. So I adore Touch of Evil. In some ways, I prefer it to Citizen Kane, even though there are more flaws than there are in Citizen Kane. I just find it more enjoyable. I love Touch of Evil. The Killing, you mentioned, I like The Killing a lot. And Elevated to the Gallows, I enjoyed a lot too.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a good film.
Yeah, and Out of the Past.
Yes, that's a classic for me. That's like one of the like sort of quintessential noirs for me.
And then for me, I've got a little list of kind of underappreciated ones, or ones that kind of surprised me that I didn't know much about, and I watched them as I think all review screeners, and they kind of really impressed me. And I've got to mention The Big Clock. I always bring this up because I love this film. Black Tuesday, I was going to mention, which we talked about earlier. Pushover, which was in Columbia Noir 4. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, that's a very good one.
Drive a Crooked Road, which is in Columbia Noir 1.
A lot of that one. Yeah, write that down.
Indicators box sets the Colombian noir and the Universal ones are great fun. They often have titles which I'm a bit like, is that noir? But yeah, as we say, who's to say? But they have some great titles, and also Panique, which is a French film, but it definitely has a strong noir flavor to it. That Criterion released that a few years back, and Odds Against Tomorrow.
Oh, that's a fantastic film.
Like
It's a Robert Wise,
yeah. So those that's a bit of an epic list, but those are ones that stand out for me. That, or at least when I looked up on Blueprint Review for all my kind of 4.5, 5-star kind of classics, there's the ones that jumped out for me. Are there any you disagree with, or any you'd add, or?
I'm just looking down my list, and you've hit a lot of them. I've got for like the sort of the set texts of noir. I'll put like Double Indemnity, Maltese Falcon. I don't think you mentioned.
Yeah, well, Maltese Falcon, I need to rewatch that. That's one that I've seen it a couple of times, and I always like it, but it never quite hits the same way as some of the others do for me. I don't know why. There's something. It doesn't quite reach the heights of the ones I mentioned. I probably need to watch it again, though. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
That one hit more for me than The Big Sleep, but again, I have to revisit The Big Sleep. I've also got Key Largo. I've got on my list.
That's what I watched recently.
Is it? The Asphalt Jungle. I've got now. I'm never sure whether that's technically noir or not. I suppose we've thrown out.
Yeah, I'd say it is.
You would say it would, John? Yeah, because I love that film.
And one of the aspects of noir is that I think it also fit nicely with the censors of the era, because you couldn't show people benefiting from crime.
Yeah.
So that was a great excuse to see people succeed at whatever crime they were going for, and then completely screw them over in the last reel. So they just become fodder for however they're going to be exited in the end.
Yeah, it's a film that it's not all that readily available at the minute, and I'm just waiting for the day when it comes out and David says, "I'm taking this one, and you're not going to get to review it." But I would buy a physical copy of that immediately. Only other two I've got on my list, they're probably the main ones. They're probably sort of slightly outside the box for some people, but Murder My Sweet is one that I really like. And Detour is one that I as well.
That's a classic. Yeah.
And then the sort of slightly more obscure ones. I watched all Anthony Mann's films recently, and he's got some really cracking noirs. Raw Deal and T-Men and Desperate are all really good ones. I got The Big Clock on here. That's one that David recommended, and I watched and loved. There's a one that I discovered in a noir box set that I got to review for the site well, not recently, it's a while back, but it's a film called Ride the Pink Horse, and it absolutely blew. I know it sounds like some sort of weird euphemism, doesn't it? But it absolutely blew me away. That's one of the things that I really love about this genre, is it seems like there's an inexhaustible supply of really good. Like I feel like I could pick at random just 4 noirs and watch them, and I'm gonna find like one that I absolutely love in that small sample.
I think that's what I think. One of the reasons they became, there's so many of them around, is they were quite cheap to make. It's more about the drama and the psychology, and you just need a few guns and things like that to kind of tell the story.
Yeah.
And and as I say, a lot of them were made around the time of the Second World War. Money was tight, and the studios wanted to churn things out, and these were considered kind of cheapies, and that's why like a studio like Columbia, who were at the time still relatively small, were able to make a lot of these films, and people watch them. So they were just nice profit makers, kind of the equivalent of horror movies these days, I guess, where they make them quite cheaply, but people go and watch them.
It's another genre where low budget doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing as well.
No.
Definitely not.
Detour. I think Detour.
I started with Vertigo, so because I'd kind of come through knowing that I already loved Psycho, started to seek out more of Hitchcock's work, and Vertigo I loved, and kind of didn't realise at the time that that was probably film noir, and it doesn't usually get mentioned,
John. Actually, because when I was saying about what isn't noir. I had written down, for some reason, I never think of Hitchcock films as noir, but there's certain ones
Yeah.
that certainly are. And
There's
Vertigo.
several.
Vertigo's
There's
greatly, isn't it? The Wrong Man is another one that.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
the same. I'm the same. I would never think of Vertigo's noir, but actually, it really is. Like, there's so many of the elements in there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And once I'd discovered that that's what it was and started seeking out more, in the early 2000s, 20th Century Fox released a series of DVDs of film noir. And
Mm.
I can't remember how many I ended up with. I was importing them region one in those glory days of DVD. And that introduced me to Laura, Boomerang.
Yeah.
Nightmare Alley was a real
Oh yeah,
standout for
that's
me.
a good one. Yeah.
Recently remade by Del Toro.
What did you think of
And
that remake?
loved it, but then I'm a Del Toro fanboy, so if there are flaws with it, I probably didn't see them.
Mhm.
But yeah, Third Man, of course, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
And then we come to Touch of Evil. Now, you touched on this earlier, how much you love it as well.
Mm.
I do. And I wanted to mention it, at least just to point out the 4K. Because when we talk about 4K and UHD, we talk about color and we talk about definition and detail and texture. And it's really interesting with Touch of Evil. I thought for years that because of the way that film had been treated, it was just a bad print. Watching the 4K last year, realized it wasn't a bad print. Orson Welles took the idea of mise en scène within noir one step further. It's like he made the film as best he could, and then he was quite happy to take the negative, stamp on it, run over it. Everything's it's out of focus. It's the whole thing feels just off. While you
Mm.
watch it, the tone is slightly off. The pitch is slightly off. The cinematography, like I say, sometimes the dialogue is inaudible and there's stuff that's out of focus. And I realized in 4K, which was enhancing where all the detail and the sharpness really was, he was pulling that focus. He was intending it to look that bad. He wanted to really invest that film with everything that noir could be.
Yeah.
And I think much as I would love to rewind time and give Orson Welles the opportunity to have released that film as he wanted to, actually taking it off of him and butchering it, that was like one more creative effort in making it a perfect noir.
It is, yeah. It's so thick with atmosphere because of all this kind of because of what he's done with it. It's yeah, I love that film. I really do.
And what I've realised in retrospect, because a more recent film that really got me into film as a thing was LA Confidential.
Oh,
Oh,
fantastic.
And
yeah.
I adored that film so much. And then I started looking up more films like LA Confidential. And it was a few years before I watched it again. And when I came across it again, I thought, I'm not going to like this now, am I? I'm going to see it as a pastiche, as a piss tape, basically. And when I watched it again, I thought, no, what they did is they looked at what made a noir and they did it again.
Yeah,
And
it's
they did it
never not
perfectly.
fantastic. It's absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. It's one of my
it
all-time
knocks it out of
favorites.
the park. Vertigo, LA Confidential, and Chinatown
Yes.
all kind of weirdly fit as some kind of noirish trilogy covering the entire breadth of cinema at its various points.
Yeah. Well, that brings me on to what I was going to briefly just touch on neo noir. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the clock. We probably shouldn't go on too long, but I do love a good neo noir as well. So I guess basically to me that just means a noir that was shot kind of after I guess after the end of the 50s. I'd probably say there aren't many 60s neo noirs that I'm aware of, but I'm sure there are some.
I'll get to one later.
I've heard.
Okay.
I've got a theory on that.
Okay.
I've got a theory on it because I've just been listening to Quentin Tarantino's book called Cinema Speculation.
Oh yeah.
And he points out that the studio system was collapsing by the end of the 50s. The 60s gave rise to a real effort for counterculture,
Mm.
things like Easy Rider, where they were actively trying not to make classical films. And
Yeah.
so he said, basically, it's a dead decade. And then you hit the end of the 60s with Bonnie and Clyde, going into the 70s, and you start getting the rise of people like Scorsese, Coppola, Spielberg, who all adored the old filmmakers. And so they were starting to bring back the old methods. And so I think that's why there's almost like I've often thought there's a bit of a dead spot in the 60s. There's Psycho, then there's Bonnie and Clyde, and I can't think of very much in between that really gets me going. So I
There's,
think he's got a point there.
I know. I mean, have you read Easy Riders and Raging Bulls? That's kind of a similar kind of. That's about the 70s mainly, but about how it kicked off with Easy Rider and
Yes,
Bonnie and Clyde.
yeah,
And stuff.
some
It's a
time
similar kind
ago.
of thing.
Yeah,
But yeah, I don't know. There is a lot of good stuff in the 60s, but yeah, I know it was quite a transitional era. I think with the 60s, there's a lot of good stuff elsewhere as well, away from Hollywood.
yes,
like-
absolutely. Yeah, we often talk in frames of Hollywood, and it's a silly thing to do. You know, it's like only a couple of months ago, or it may have been even longer now, I reviewed that fantastic box set for you guys, World Noir.
Oh yeah,
And that was incredible. That was incredible. So yeah, it's definitely a genre worth, especially when the French identified it. They kind of then went off and went, "We could do this as well." And yes,
yeah.
they definitely could.
There's some fantastic French noirs. Yeah. There's some quite early on as well. They or at least noirish kind of stuff. I'm trying to think. There's one that I absolutely adored that I watched quite a few years ago, but I'm struggling to remember what it's called. It might come to me later, but yeah, some very, very good stuff. What sort of neo noirs everyone's like? We've mentioned a few already. There's a couple others that I want to mention. We mentioned Chinatown, LA Confidential. They're two of my all-time favorite films, so they're definitely up there. Other ones that I enjoy, I do enjoy Red Rock West. It's a lot of fun. U-Turn is a lot of fun. Devil in a Blue Dress, The Man Who Wasn't There, The Long Goodbye, going back to the 70s again, A Simple Plan, Blue Velvet.
Simple Plan is a really underrated film. I think that's Sam Raimi's best.
Yeah.
It is, and I'm so annoyed because Arrow are releasing it on Blu-ray, but it's US only. It's like, and it's so expensive to bring them in from the US. But hopefully, someone's going to. I'm hoping it means that someone else in the UK is going to release it soon. But we'll see. And yeah,
it's interesting you mentioned The Man Who Wasn't There as well, because the one on my list for this bit was The Big Lebowski, which Roger Ebert called the first slacker noir.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so brilliant. It's like that idea of the wrong man. And it's absolutely that. He just does not want to be there. He wants nothing to do with anything that's going on around him, and he cannot keep away from it. It's a perfect noir, and it's hilarious at the same time.
And the Coens have made a few. I mean, also on the list was Blood Simple.
Yeah, I was just going to say to complete the trilogy, I've got Fargo as well.
Yeah, Miller's Crossing as well, I guess. Kind of. Yeah, it's a little different. No, I guess it's a bit more of a gangster film, really, but it has some elements. Also, I want to mention Brick as a kind of an alternative noir, school noir, if you want to call it. But definitely
fascinating me that he did the dialogue in that. Yeah, that was so 40s. And it shouldn't have worked. It should not have worked, and it did.
Well, I think, David, you've hit nearly everything on my neo noir list. The only ones I think you haven't mentioned I've got The Long Goodbye.
Oh, that wasn't my list. I think I just said it too quickly.
Right. So
I heard you. I heard it. Yeah.
The Grifters is the other one.
Oh, The Grifters. Yes. Yeah.
Nice choice. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Well, I think what we should do now, we're just looking at the time. Should we chat about recent noirs that we've watched? Because I think we've all watched a noir or two ready for the podcast. I'll kick things off. I watched a few, but I think I'm going to briefly mention Yokohama BJ Blues, which I watched. But I have which is definitely a neo noir. It's Japanese, made in the 80s, and I've reviewed that on the website, so I'm just going to lead people to the website to read my write-up on that. But that was one that really impressed me. It's just been released by Radiance Films, or it's about to be released by Radiance Films. But if you want quite a quirky, unusual kind of Japanese take on neo-noir, then definitely check that one out. But one that I watched in preparation was The Whistler. So yeah, I got the yeah. This is from the box set that Indicator released a while ago. I'm trying to think. Is it one of the Columbia ones? I should.
It is, yeah, it is, because I reviewed this for the site, didn't I?
Yeah, and one of the main reasons I picked this was I didn't have a full night, and I realized but I wanted to watch some noir, and I thought I'm sure there's some short ones, but the Whistler films are almost all about an hour long.
Yeah, they're gloriously short. You can watch about 3 in a night.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think we need more films like this now and again. I guess now we've got TV, which kind of fills a similar kind of slot, but I do love these kind of just quickie kind of features where it's and this is one of the best things about The Whistler, because I enjoyed it a great deal, is it's so economical about telling its story. It just gets on with it. There's no extra fluff. It just cracks on. And so The Whistler, they were a series of The Whistler films, and they were based, I've not watched all the extras to get all the details, but from what I can gather, they're based on a radio series. At first I thought they'd be like the Whistler character would be kind of the main detective or something in all these stories, but no, he's just kind of like a figure lurking in the background who narrates the story. Because the film is it's about a depressed man who hires an assassin at the start of the film to kill him. He says he gives his contact the details and says, I want this man dead. I don't want to know when or how, just make it happen. But what happens, because part of the reason he's depressed is his wife died in a boat. I think it's a boating accident or something. It's been a few weeks since I've seen it now, so I might be wrong. But what happens is he changes his mind, and especially because he finds out that his wife is alive, so he changes his mind. So then the film goes on. He's desperately trying to find the man who is going to kill him and tell him not to. But the kind of spanner in the works is the go-between that he spoke to organize this has been killed himself. So it's a nice, simple kind of very noir kind of plot that it just cracks on with, and I really enjoyed it. It's very atmospheric. It's got a little bit of gallows humor in there now and again, especially the killer. We intercut between the main guy, Earl Conrad is called, and you intercut that with the killer. You actually see the killer preparing and kind of playing with Earl, and he has a he's quite intense, the bad guy. He's quite frightening. He's obsessed with instilling his Earl with the fear of death. He wants to kill him by fear. That's his kind of method. He's trying to experiment with this idea. So he's teasing him. Rather than just going and shooting him, he follows him around and plays with him and plays with his mind. And it's just a ride. It's just a fun ride. As I say, there's you could argue that a lot of it might seem quite conventional and kind of cliche, but it just goes with it, and as I say, wastes no time. And yeah, I thought it was fantastic. I'm llooking forward to digging in to the films.
You're gonna love them all, David, though. There's a few weaker ones.
Yeah.
One thing you didn't I suppose you only seen one, but one thing it's interesting about the series is that all but one of them star Richard Dix, but he plays different characters in every one of them.
Oh, right.
So it's like a sort of anthology series with Richard Dix as sort of the through line. It was one of my favorite letterbox quotes or sort of letterbox reviews that I saw was the one film that doesn't star Richard Dix. Someone's review of it was just, yes, it's true, this film has no dicks.
I've not seen these Whistler films, so they're straight on the list.
Oh yeah, no, John, you're gonna love them as well. As it's one of these things that they fell into my lap, I thought I signed up to review it, and sometimes I sign up to review a box set and it turns up, and I think, oh, I've done the right thing here because this is going to take a while. But after watching the first film, I thought it's going to be absolute blast. And I just powered through them in no time at all because it's one of the things I love about noir. There's so many short, punchy ones. If you're looking for a genre where you're going to find a lot of 70-minute run times, this is your one.
I guess a lot of them were B movies like this. It would have been a B movie. It would just shoved on the end, so they kept them short, they kept them simple, they churned them out. But they knew what we're doing, and as long as the kind of script is there and you've got a decent kind of bit of talent behind it, then you're in for a lot of fun with it.
It's really fascinating how they use the character of the Whistler. Like you said, he's just he sort of introduces it, doesn't he? And they as the series goes on, they sort of get a better handle on how to use him. He turns up as sort of like this, like a sort of representation of the character's internal monologue at particularly like anxious moments for him. You just see his shadow cast on the wall, and he starts to talk. But it's very funny in the first one. I think it's the first one, maybe the first couple. It's a little bit corny how they're using, because I'm sure there's a bit in the middle where the characters just stop in the middle of some dialogue and go, Can you hear some whistling out there?
He does affect the drama a little bit. He acts as a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina machina at times, where he kind of well, I don't want to spoil the film, but he does slightly affect what's going on in the drama. So he does have a little bit of a role, but he's usually just lurking there in the shadows, which again is quite a nice noirish kind of thing to add to it. So it was a lot of fun. John, what have you watched recently? Do you want to chat about?
Well, it's an old film, and it certainly ain't fun. But I watched The Conversation again.
Oh, nice.
And released in between The Godfathers, and it was Coppola's work with Gene Hackman, possibly at his best. And I love the fact that it's slow and it takes its time, but it's making you complicit. And when you start to realize how ashamed he really is, and the shame becomes paranoia, and by the end he is an absolute wreck. And so it's got all the elements that you would expect from Coppola, which kind of aren't what you immediately expect from noir. But from a story perspective, you're in for a rough ride, which I find quite reassuring in how he presents it. So that's one that I watched again recently. And then the other one that I wanted to talk about from the 80s was William Friedkin's To Live and Die in LA from 1985.
I've never seen this.
This is what I keep meaning to watch. It's on my list, but I still haven't got around to it. But
I cannot recommend it enough, because it is fantastic fun. It's like a proto Lethal Weapon with William Peterson. So he's almost like a Mel Gibson Lethal Weapon character. He's self-destructive. He's on the hunt for William Dafoe's forger. And William Dafoe is typically playing slightly psychotic. But the problem is William Peterson. He is a loose cannon. He takes chances. He is becoming a criminal himself in trying to catch this criminal. But the way Friedkin films it is very much post-French Connection, really getting into the 80s. You guys haven't seen it, so I can't talk about the ending. But all I will say is, if you want a brutal ending for a noir, wow, this will blow your mind. It's you watch it and you go, what the hell have I just seen? They cannot end it like that, and he did.
It's interesting you say that, because I was thinking about what I love about noir, and I was thinking, like, nowadays, like, I'm not a big horror fan and things like that, and nowadays I tend to sort of shy away a bit from from films that go really nasty. But when I'm watching a noir,
someone was trying to recommend Terrifier 3 to me the other day, and the way he was describing it was like, oh, it just made me squirm, and I'm like, I have not got time for
yeah. And yet, when I'm watching noir, I put on like an old 40s noir, and I think, God, I hope this is going to be really unpleasant.
Yeah,
something just fascinating.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I know exactly what you mean. They're always like, they rarely end on a high note. You're usually pretty grim. It's but there's something just intoxicating about it.
Yeah,
it's like I was talking about the Whistler earlier, saying how much I enjoy it. It's about a man who's trying to get himself killed. it's like there's no reason I should be like, but I found it fun. It's weird. It's very, very weird. I guess it's about the escapism of cinema. I think it is weird. It is, as I say, about horror. I'm not a huge horror guy, but people who are into these super gruesome, nasty kind of tortury, horrible films, they enjoy them. They find them fun. It's weird. It's just it's the magic of cinema in a kind of the typical way you think of magic.
Yes. I saw a study once based on, and a similar thing was done with heavy metal music.
Yeah.
Saying that actually people who genuinely love the proper, goriest films that, your average person would look at and go, why does this even exist? And they measured the brain levels, and it's like, no, they are literally being calmed by this. It's like it's almost soothing to them. They're getting a high from it, and it's like, all power to you. I don't deny that you can have that. I'm kind of done with it.
The current trend seems to be serial killer documentaries, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's so popular. Yeah. Crazy. Well, I'll move on to Andy in a second, but I did want to mention once again that your picks are films I wouldn't normally think of as noir, but then you're totally, because again, the conversation is another one of my all-time favorites. It's weird how so many of these noir kind of films are my all-time favorites, but it's a top 10 best. It's a top 10 best for me. I adore that film.
Yeah.
The final shot is one of the most powerful shots in all of cinema.
Yeah. Oh.
But I never thought of that as noir, but it is.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. I'm the same. It never occurred to me, but it absolutely is.
Yeah. Cool, but Andy, then what have you been watching?
I was just going to say on the same point actually. The conversation is one of those. It's one of those rare things where Coppola was one of the few people who had two films competing for the best picture in the same year. It was the year Godfather Part 2 won, and the conversation was up. And I always say, controversially, I would have picked the conversation over Godfather Part 2.
It would have been more interesting, wouldn't it?
It would, Except I wouldn't have picked it because the same year Chinatown was up as well.
Oh wow,
that's true.
That is crazy. Yeah, all three of those top 20 favorites of me.
I mean, the other two films are Lenny and The Tower and Inferno, which are both good films. So anyway, I'll move on to mine there. So I went down a bit of a funny avenue in preparation, because I've been in preparation for December. I've been putting together a sort of advent calendar of Christmas films from the golden age of Hollywood that I haven't seen before. So I'm not going to watch It's a Wonderful Life. I was trying to find 25 Christmas films, and I've actually ended up with about 38. I've got to pare it down.
Wow.
So what I started doing is I started picking out noirs from that, and then I found that there's a whole sort of subgenre of Christmas noir, which is you would not put it together, but there's absolutely loads of these films, these noir films set at Christmas. I watched how many did I watch? 6.
My God, you're on brand, aren't you? Noir-vember to Christmas. That is brilliant.
So some of them are sort of. I haven't seen a bad one yet. I've seen some that are sort of not amazing. So Christmas Holiday, that was okay. Cover Up, that was another one that's sort of just sort of fairly standard noir. But then there's some really interesting ones. There's one called Lady in the Lake, which is set at Christmas, and it's a Philip Marlowe one, but it's entirely shot from his point of view. So you follow, like, Robert Montgomery plays him, and you just see it through his eyes. So occasionally you'll see Robert Montgomery if he passes a mirror or something. But I thought that was very interesting. It does get a bit wearing, to be honest, across the course of the film, but it was an interesting gimmick. And another one that I couldn't believe I'd never heard of, because it's such a crazy thing. It's called Repeat Performance, and it's a noir time loop film.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's a woman who murders her husband on New Year's Eve, and then she wishes she could have a do-over, and then suddenly it's the beginning of the year again, and she's trying to stop all these events happening that lead her back to killing her husband. And she I just thought, I can't believe I've never heard of this before.
Oh, that sounds so
This
up my. I love time loop films, and I've got to see this film.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely look it up. It's not a masterpiece, but I really enjoyed it. It was really good. And then just before I get to my main one, there's another one, a British film called Cash on Demand. It stars Peter Cushing as a bank manager who robber comes, and he essentially forces this very sort of stiff, awkward bank manager to assist him in this robbery by he's got his wife on the other end of the phone, and he's attached electrodes to her head. And he says if he doesn't assist him, he's gonna put enough electricity through it that he says she'll never regain her wits. So it's a very dark theme. The film itself, it's very kind of, it's all in one place, so it's kind of like a play, and it's not very sort of, doesn't have that sort of noirish style, but it certainly has the sort of the darkness of it, and that was a really fantastic watch as well. So
I was just gonna say I own that one. That's it's in the Hammer box set. It's a Hammer film.
Yeah,
it's in volume 2 of Indicator's Hammer sets. I've not watched that yet, but I did watch one of the other. I've seen 2 other films from that set that are amazing. That's The Snorkel and Never Take Sweets from a Stranger. Those 2 I enjoyed those a lot.
Oh well, yeah, definitely give that a go this Christmas. I mean, it's set at Christmas. It's not going to be like watching Home Alone or anything, but it's definitely going to be good. But the one that I decided to elaborate on, which was the first one I watched, and it proves that point that I made about picking them and fight, because it was like right out of the box. It was just a fantastic film which I hadn't heard of before, and it does have a fairly sort of a fair bit of renown. I think Criterion released a copy. I don't know if there's a Region 2 one yet, but there's definitely a Region 1 out there. It's from 1961. It's called Blast of Silence.
Oh, okay.
And it's technically a neo-noir because it's 1961, so it's just the other side of the classic period. And it's got all the things I love about noir. It's really pared down, brutal plot about a hitman stalking his target. It was really short run time, big city setting, atmosphere of real grim foreboding. But it's set at Christmas, so you get all these like Santas in the background and Christmas music and stuff. And it's just, someone online described it as the perfect film for people who hate Christmas, because but it's just a fantastic juxtaposition. There's all these really like beautiful scenes of the protagonist just stalking through the streets of New York, surrounded by decorations and stuff, and it just makes him seem like he's from another world. It's a really low budget film, and it has the same feel for me. Less of like classic noir as like a sort of precursor to 80s American independent cinema. It's got this black and white cinematography and like this sort of deliberate pacing. It reminded me of like Jim Jarmusch's Stranger Than Paradise or Wayne Wang's Chan is Missing, and their films I love, and I love that whole sort of American independent cinema of the 80s and 90s. So this was really a really good choice for me. Directed by a guy called Alan Barron, who also wrote and starred in it, but it was meant to star Peter Falk. But then he accepted a better paid role in Murder Inc., which he went on to be nominated for an Oscar for. So Barron stepped in and said, I'll play the role myself, and he does a pretty good job of it. It's not really an actor's film anyway. It's got a very sort of naturalistic slice of life feel to it, albeit, you know, a very grim slice. There's one controversial element to it that a lot of people absolutely hate, and it's got a voiceover. There's this almost constant voiceover narration, and it's delivered by a blacklisted actor called Lionel Stander. He isn't in the film, and he doesn't represent a character, and he's not even represented in like the like protagonists in a monologue or anything like that. He's just this omniscient narrator, but his omniscience seems to only extend to this one character. It is a lot of people find it too intrusive and silly, but I just loved it. I thought it was funny. I don't know if there's meant to be a tinge of humor there, or if it just is accidentally funny, but it's just this really unusual wrinkle that I've never seen used anywhere before in quite that way. And it was added at the last minute, apparently, to just try and pull all the plot elements together. And the dialogue for it was written by another blacklisted Hollywood name, Waldo Sant. He went on to write Midnight Cowboy and Serpico and all those great films. So there's a lot of amazing things about it. The last sort of amazing things, I've gone on about it for quite a while here, but the last sort of amazing thing about it is that the stories from the production of it could be like an amazing film noir themselves. So apparently what happened is Barron, the director, he had worked on Errol Flynn's last film, which is called Cuban Rebel Girls, and it was shot on location in Cuba. And it's not a recognized classic, that one, but the crew of that film had to flee the country because of the Cuban Revolution, and they just abandoned all their equipment there and got out quickly. So Barron struck a deal that he could use the equipment to make Blast of Silence if he could smuggle it out of the country. And apparently at the time he was also wanted in Cuba for accidentally shooting and killing a man. And it also accidentally had an affair with a Cuban gangster's girlfriend.
Wow,
that's crazy.
So, I mean, I love Blast of Silence. I almost want to see that film more.
Wow.
So yeah, I would definitely recommend if you're a noir fan, you like that pared down, brutal, and yeah, definitely seek that one out.
Cool. I must admit, I looked up Christmas noir, and there's somebody's put a list on IMDb, and there's quite a few I've seen as well. And I won't mention them because I'm going to wait for your list when you start your challenge. Although I will mention one because it's not a golden age one, and that is LA Confidential. That's obviously set at Christmas. So yeah,
that's true. Yes, yeah.
I'll have to put that on this Christmas then. Get in the mood.
Good idea. Excellent. Because my wife keeps threatening to put on Love Actually.
Oh
again.
No!
And it's like
that's a brutal film.
Yeah, that's grim. Brilliant. Well, I think that about does it then. Unless there's anything else about noir that anyone wants to.
I was just going to suggest, because you've mentioned a couple of times how, especially in the golden age, the same actors would keep appearing. Who do you think are the quintessential noir actors? Weirdly, I've just had a realization, because for me, I think noir. I think Peter Lorre in M for its Lang.
Yeah.
And also Humphrey Bogart. And of course, the two of them together were in Casablanca.
Yeah.
So I still can't quite think of Casablanca as noir, but you've got two of the best noir actors right there together.
Yeah.
So
if you think of Peter Lorre's scenes as well, I guess that's maybe some of the most noirish moments in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's definitely one of my favorite. I think another actor. I think he shows up in a lot of film noir, and he's always great. Is Dan Duryea.
Oh yeah.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
I do enjoy it when he crops up. Wasn't he known as well? Wasn't he known, especially in those days, as I can't remember the name of the nickname, but he's kind of known for hitting women in his films, which is really not a very nice way to be remembered. But I can remember something mentioned that in some of the special features, when reportedly he was supposed to be like one of the nicest, like most family man sort of actors in Hollywood, but he got this weird reputation for being this nasty, abusive guy on screen.
What do you think of noir's reputation for misogyny? Because I know it's often accused of it, and I think it quite often it doesn't seem to be condoning. I mean, there are obviously exceptions, and you'd expect that from the era. But
yeah, I guess one thing we haven't mentioned is the kind of some of the tropes of film noir. One of the main ones that crops again and again is the idea of the femme fatale, I guess, and it's kind of the evil woman temptress who's going to kind of say, yeah, I do see where that could be problematic. And I think one I've definitely seen in some kind of documentaries and commentaries and things about film, about noir, talking about how the genre kind of really hit its stride after the war, like I mentioned earlier. And I think obviously what happened after the war was the men came back from fighting to find the world had changed, because women had to take over a lot of the work and the roles, and that caused a lot of problems. A lot of men felt emasculated by this, and that kind of inspired a lot of these femme fatale characters and a lot of the kind of noir plots. So there's definitely something in there.
There is, and I think that angle is the only defense that I had, and you could probably expand on this, is in Mildred Pierce, because everyone in it is just awful.
Yeah.
But the men are uniformly very misogynistic. And they're just dreadful people. and of course, that's the point that the film is trying to make. I just find it makes it in such a simpering, soft focus. I'm going to go off on a tangent.
Well, there's certainly a lot of misogyny rooted in there, and I think it's there's a line that I wrote down when I watched, again, it's that film Repeat Performance I was talking about, and the line was, "Darling, you're a woman. You're not expected to have either judgment or intelligence." and it's spoken by a character that you're not supposed to like. So there's that. But I don't think that it's sufficiently challenged by the woman he says it to, and she does seem like the sort of woman who should challenge it a bit more. So, I mean, obviously, you're gonna find those things in there. Interesting.
I think there's a case of filmmakers and writers having the cake and eating it, and two that we haven't mentioned that kind of scrape in. I think Sam Peckinpah's The Getaway with Ali MacGraw, and Ali MacGraw, if you take it on the surface, it's a dreadful role for a woman, but actually, you look under the surface, and she's the key to that whole story. So it's like the character's being mistreated, the actress was possibly being a bit mistreated, maybe not a good fit, and yet it kind of works for the story. So it kind of spins around on a pivot where you see these people and these characters suffering, and yet that's part of the reason of watching it. So it's odd. And the other one is Long Good Friday. I think kind of scrapes in. Helen Mirren had to make something of that role, and she did it brilliantly.
Yeah, she does.
And again, it was very underwritten. And anything that you like about that role in that film is her pushing it. So it's funny. There's always been a bit of push and pull with misogyny and the femme fatale and all that. It's an interesting angle.
Yeah, it does throw up some of the more interesting female roles of the era, though. And you compare, like, say, Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity, her role, compared to like the sort of virtuous sort of thing roles that Greer Garson was getting, and she was always up for Oscars and stuff, but a lot of those roles were just sort of blandly repetitive. At least with the femme fatales, it got a bit more into the nitty gritty of character and maybe created some more interesting roles for women.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say that myself. I can say that is one could say it did create some interesting roles for women. I guess another one. It reminded me of a film of a noir that kind of bucks the trend a little bit in terms of it being very focused on a woman, and that is that My Name is Julia Ross.
Oh, that's
I
a
don't
good
know
film,
if you've
isn't
seen
it?
that. Yeah, that's very good, and that's obviously centered on Julia Ross. And it was I'm just looking at my review now because it's been a while since I've seen it, but that was actually based on a novel written by a woman as well. But it's definitely a film noir, and it kind of it's a nice kind of alternative because that was 1945, so it's in that kind of classic era. So it books the trend a little bit, but it's an interesting subject.
So maybe just to round things off, then we should pick our favorite femme fatale.
Oh yeah,
You have a favorite femme
oh,
fatale?
oh,
I'm going to go with I love Anne Savage in Detour. I
okay.
think she's
yeah,
few redeeming features, and she
I,
has that wonderful, like flinty voice, and I just think she's great.
The one I mean, it's
yeah,
a really obvious choice, but whenever I think of femme fatale, it's so hard not to think of Barbara Stanwyck and
Yeah.
Declan Dempsey.
yeah.
It's like, I don't know. It's yeah.
Weirdly, I can't get past that as well. And again, it's almost like tunnel vision. But Kim Basinger in LA Confidential.
Yes.
I was thinking of her as well. Those are the two for me. They're real kind of.
It's weird as well because talking about Confidential, I've been thinking about it, and I'd just forgotten she was in it for a second, and she was she won the Oscar, didn't she?
Poor Kim. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness! I think an apologies due.
Yeah.
I was thinking of, because I've got Christmas now on the brain. I just had an image of Russell Crowe wrapping a wife beater up in Christmas lights. That was the first thing that had gone into my brain.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that'll probably do us for that then. Before we go though, has anyone got anything to plug that they've written on the site or elsewhere? I don't know if anyone's appeared in any podcasts or written anywhere else. Anything you've got to plug?
Not really. I've just written a long review on the site for the new upcoming Hitchcock The Beginning box set, which is a really fantastic box set. Not all the films are great in it. There are a handful of great films in there, but it's just teeming with extras and yeah. If you want something for the Christmas list and you're a Hitchcock fan, that's definitely one for the list.
Nice.
Yeah, I owe you a review at the moment for Things Will Be Different This Time, which you mentioned earlier was you like Time Loop. And that it's a really lo-fi film, but it's great. It's look out for that one. It should be available at the moment, I think, from Shudder.
Excellent. I'll keep an eye out for that. Well, me, I mentioned earlier, I recently reviewed Yokohama BJ Blues, and that fits in our noir theme. So check my review out of that on the site. I also reviewed the Legend of Fong Sai-yuk collection, which I enjoyed a lot. I'm hoping to within the next week, I should have a review of The Man from Mallorca up there. Not quite noir, but it's crime, procedural thriller sort of thing. So it's getting towards that side of things, but not quite. But yeah, hopefully I'll have that up soon. Great. So yeah, that just leaves me to thank the both of you for joining us. I had a good time talking about film.
Yeah, me too.
Going well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and thank you to whoever's listening. Who knows? And hope to see you.
Stuck with us.
Yeah. But yeah, hope to have you guys back on the show again soon. So good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you very much. Good night.